well, you can also do things, if you move to a new neighborhood, for example, there'll be a local cafe somewhere. You can go there once a week for like several months or twice a week at a regular time. And you can introduce yourself to the owner and you can tell them that you've moved into the neighborhood and you can introduce yourself to the waiters and the waitresses and you can become a known fixture there and you'll start to feel comfortable there. And then you'll be able to start to have conversations with people there. And you can do the same thing with people at your local store. You have to, and I had clients who didn't even know how to introduce themselves properly, which can be a real impediment for people. So, you say to someone, well, you look them in the eye because then you're watching their face and then you can see how they're reacting and your unconscious socialization abilities will kick in if you attend to the right cues. You say, hello there, I'm Jordan Peterson. I just moved into the neighborhood. I'm going to be dropping into your store pretty often. I thought I'd introduce myself. And then you stick out your hand and you look at them and you make sure that you're paying attention to them and not you. And you say, what's your name? And everyone responds positively to that. And maybe if they don't, then it's time to find a different corner store.
Right.
And then you try to remember their name. But if you don't, you say, we met the other day, but I'm terrible with names. I forgot your name. Could you tell me again? And if you do that, then, that little corner store, then it's not completely foreign territory and you're not alienated from it. You're going to start to feel comfortable. And the same thing is true for this place you might go every week. You have to establish these routines of socialization because otherwise you're in enemy territory, at least unknown territory. And that's extremely hard on you physiologically because you don't know if you're surrounded by friends or foe, eh? And so it's the same with your neighbors.
You are proposing an act of revolution by going to a new environment and sticking out your hand and saying, hi, my name is John. What is your name? And actually listening to the response. That is a revolutionary act. That's a transformative. I take my son, he's 12. And so I've started being highly intentional about our relationship because I'm in the early stages of raising what is soon to be released in the wild, a grown man. And so we have breakfast every Tuesday at this establishment here in the States called Waffle House. It's just a chain diner. And one of the revolutionary acts I'm trying to teach him is the act of radical generosity. And I struggle with sometimes basic, hi, my name is. And so the way I began doing this, the Waffle House opened in our small town outside of Nashville, Tennessee. I started over tipping in a significant way because nobody wants to be working the 6 a.m. shift on a Tuesday at a Waffle House. And so I told my son, hey, we're going to take care of these waitresses. They're awesome. They bring us coffee. They bring us juice. They're lovely. And within a few months, they know our order when we get there. They are smiling when we walk in, and it has absolutely transitioned our social interaction. Now I look forward to spending time with my son, but also hanging out with these great waitresses and asking about their cool tattoos, right? But it's just going first. It's just going first, going first, going first.
Yeah, well, that emphasis on somewhat excess generosity in those situations is extremely useful too, because it doesn't take that much to distinguish yourself on the attentional front from the run-of-the-mill customer. And you only need, imagine this, you probably only need between 10, maybe under 10 places to go in your social community in order to be well situated. And so you said, is it every week you do this with your son?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we could do some quick arithmetic around that. How long in all does that whole event take?
By the time we sit down and get him to school late every Tuesday, it's probably a grand total of 45 minutes.
Okay, and what about travel time?
It's probably 20 minutes there. So it's about an hour and a half.
Okay, so it's 90 minutes.
Full circle.
It's 90 minutes, and that's once a week?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so then you figure you're awake for about 16 hours a day. And of that awake time, say 12 hours is useful for doing the sorts of things that you're doing with your son, because you're going to spend 4 hours in just self-maintenance, right? So let's say 12 hours. 90 minutes is about approximately 1/10 of that. We'll just use that as an approximation for easy mathematics. So you've fixed 10% of one day, and there's 7 days. And so that's basically 3% of your life you fixed by doing that. And that means you'd only have to fix 30 more things and you'd have fixed 100% of your life. Well, you tell a story in your book about one of your friends who was talking about exercise and health, and he said to you, change the things you do every day. The things that repeat, those are your life. That's the routine around which your life is built. People very much overvalue special occasions and vacations and that sort of thing, and they don't pay nearly enough attention to the kind of thing you're doing with your son. It's like that's once a week. You might be able to do that for years. It's 3% of your life. If you get that perfect, now you've got 3% taken care of, and you can move to the next small piece and do the same thing. You do that with some friends, and you do that with your wife, for example, a couple of times a week for a couple of hour sessions. One of the things I found in my practice was that this is useful for people who are trying to embark on an intimate relationship, is you need to talk to your wife about the domestic economy and the practicalities of your life together for about 90 minutes a week. And you need to date at least once a week for that length of time, or maybe twice if you can manage that. And if you don't do that, you will become isolated and lonely, and you'll develop a backlog of communication. And if you don't fix that, you'll end up divorced, and then you'll be fixing it for the rest of your life.
Absolutely, absolutely. And whenever, man, backlog of communication, I love that. I love that idea, as though I'm just putting rocks in a backpack, and eventually that backpack's going to wear me down if I don't have a regular practice of communication. And again, somehow this became a moral or characterological issue. I think it's the skills issue, man. I think taking some of the drama and smoke out of it and just saying, hey, I don't know how to tell you, wife. I've never seen it done. I didn't see it at my house growing up. I've never seen it. I don't know how to do this. So I want to practice once a week. Let's go over our calendar. Let's go over our budget. Like, how are we going to spend money this week? And let's practice. I'm going to try to tell you what I need this week. About 5 years ago, my marriage was, we were hanging on by a spider's web, just hanging on. And so my wife and I realized we got to, if we're going to hang on to this thing, we're going to have to rebuild it out of ash, right? And I can't tell you, I'm a 6'2", 195-pound, I lived in Texas my whole life, Texas male. What it took for me to look across the table and tell my wife, I just occasionally want you to tell me that you're proud of me. That was a hard thing for me to say. And I didn't even realize how desperately I'd been searching for her approval for the first 15 years we'd been married, and how much I kept going out on a limb and on a limb and on a limb. And I was taking her non-response as rejection, and I never put my needs out there. And I was embarrassed and ashamed to say it. And then she said, man, that would have been super helpful 15 years ago. And now she makes it a regular practice of our marriage to say, hey, I see you, and I appreciate what you're doing for our family. Golly, what a gift. And I didn't know that doing the dishes was akin to foreplay. Great. Yeah. I will knock those dishes out all day long. It's about practicing saying your needs out loud. And then, man, get out of your head. The number of hours I've spent researching workout programs when I could have just gone to work out, or researching how to tell your wife instead of just telling her. What a waste of time. We have too much data, man. We have too much information. We need to go act.
Well, you can have a preliminary conversation with your partner, let's say, and say something like, look, we need to tell each other what we need and want. And we're both too stupid to do that because we don't really know what we need and want. And we have almost no practice at it. And worse, here's something about that that's really quite sad and frightening, is like, if one of the things you wanted to hear is that your wife was grateful to you for, let's say, providing properly for the family, so say proud of you, there's a part of you that's quite insecure that wants that message, and you're vulnerable on that point, hey? And so then if you share that vulnerability, the person with whom you're sharing it knows exactly where to stick you if they want. And so it takes real trust to do that. But the alternative is assuming that, and people do this all the time, they'll say things like, well, if you loved me, you'd know what I wanted. It's like, well, first of all, that's a pretty perfect love. And second,
I'm not clairvoyant, right? Yeah.
well, right. Well, you're not even smart enough to do that for yourself most of the time. It's someone else. And so, you can make an agreement with your partner and say, look, here's something I'd like to hear you say. And here's the words I'd like to hear. Will you just say that? Another person might object and they'll say, well, that sounds false if I do it, or it won't be real because we're just practicing it and it's artificial. And then you think, well, wait a second. We're going to be together for the next 10,000 days. And if it takes, or more. And if it takes 20 stupid practices to get it right, that's not so much stacked up over 10,000 days. And it might be with many marriages, I would say there's probably 10 things that each person wants to hear on a quasi-regular basis that would make the difference between the marriage succeeding and the marriage failing. But it means you have to sit down with your partner and say, look, we should decide jointly what we need and want, and we should have enough courage to try to express ourselves stupidly in the attempt to get it. And then allow ourselves to make mistakes, while we're practicing.
I love that. I find that we've become goal obsessed. And so if I want to do these things so that I can keep my marriage, I find that I end up way out on a limb. I find out by chasing somewhere I don't want to go. I find it more valuable to say, I want to live a life that is not chasing happiness, because that's just cocaine and cotton candy, but I want to chase a life of joy. And all of the data tells me a good marriage, a good connection with the romantic, intimate partner over a long period of time is the best bet I have in maximizing joy. And so if I'm going to do that, that means I've got to be awkward. And by the way, if you can stand in front of somebody naked and say, do you see me? And do you think I'm beautiful? Do you want to join bodies with me? Surely you can say, hey, when I see dishes in the sink, it makes me feel like I'm not being the romantic partner. I feel like I'm less of a wife because I've created this narrative in my head that this is what a perfect wife does or a perfect husband does. Can you help with the dishes? Good gosh, you can stand in front of somebody naked and say, here I am. Surely you can say, hey, can you help with the dishes, right? And